This is the exact moment that changed everything. The moment Sonny had sealed not just his fate, but the entire Corleone family. Yet there are so many hidden secrets that people all these years later never seem to notice, and to be honest, you can't blame them. It's the first time we see Don Corleone and his inner circle in action. Vito is being tested to his limits by the cunningly ambitious yet mysterious Virgil the Turk Sollozo. Clearly, no pushover. He goes head-to-head with the Don himself. While knowing the risks, they both masterfully continue playing this dangerous game. But it looks like Sonny didn't get the memo. On the surface, it all appears quite cut and dry. But to those who know to look deeper, they realize the true extent of what is really going on. It's the spark that ignited the world of The Godfather, foreshadowing a lot of what was to come, all hiding in plain sight. But it goes much deeper than that. There's so much going on in this scene, a true Godfather masterclass you need to understand. But don't worry, this will give you all its hidden secrets, uncovering some of the most powerful lessons from the Godfather trilogy that you can learn from and actually start using in your life, giving that unfair edge everyone seems to be after. But again, I have to warn you, this changed the way I viewed The Godfather forever, and it connected the dots I never knew existed. Hey, and by the way, do me a favor, take a look at the like and subscribe button. Don't be a gavone. Hit them once and comment inner circle. Come on, let's get this to 10,000 likes. Loyalty like that don't go unnoticed. Come on, before I gotta start making some phone calls.
That's a Sicilian message.
Chapter 1. Setting the stage. What was happening at the time? Alright, let's set the stage. It's the late 1940s. The Corleone family is one of the most powerful crime syndicates in New York. Their reach extended far beyond the city, with influence in politics, unions, and legitimate businesses. They were respected, feared, and most importantly, untouchable, at least until now. The family's operations were diverse and carefully managed. Their bread and butter, gambling, and unions. Bookmaking, loan sharking, and casino ventures were all profitable, but the family's real genius was their ability to integrate their illegal operations with legitimate fronts. The Genco Pura olive oil company, for example, was the perfect cover for moving money and maintaining appearances. Vito Corleone, the Don, ran the family with an iron hand wrapped in a velvet glove. He was strategic, patient, and focused on building alliances. His network of judges, politicians, and police ensured that he wasn't the richest or the flashiest Don, but he was the most respected. He valued loyalty and family above all else, prioritized reputation and relationships over pure profit. By now, the Corleone family was at a crossroads. Business was good, but the underworld was evolving. Other families were slowly moving towards a much more dangerous business, seeing it as the future of organized crime. Especially now with the gold mine that was prohibition long gone, they were looking for the next big thing. Internally, the family was tightly knit, but not without its tensions. Sonny, Vito's eldest son, was the heir apparent, but his fiery temper and impulsive nature sometimes clashed with his father's calculated approach. Tom Hagen, the family's consigliere, was the level-headed advisor who kept things running smoothly, though some resented his position as an outsider. Michael, the youngest son, was still seen as an outsider, not in the business, not yet. And Fredo? Well, what can I say about Fredo? Anyway, on the surface, the Corleones were a fortress, but everything was about to change with the arrival of a mysterious figure, a man whose ambitions and methods would send shockwaves through the underworld. Who is Virgil Sollozzo? Virgil the Turk Sollozo is quite the character. Most of his life is shrouded in mystery, but thanks to Tom Hagen, here's what we know. There are 3 reasons why they call Sollozzo the Turk. He spent a lot of time in Turkey and apparently has a Turkish wife and kids. The second is that he's supposed to be very quick with the knife, as Luca would soon find out. Another is the simple fact that with his dark complexion and build, he could actually be mistaken for a true Turk. It's quite interesting how he was described in the novel. But from what we know, given his deep connections in Sicily, and oh yeah, the fact that he speaks fluent Sicilian, I think it's safe to assume he's actually Sicilian. So here's where we see how and why the Corleone family was on top for so long. Before the meeting was even scheduled, the Don had to investigate everything he could on this Turk. So what did he want? Well, Sollozzo wanted to approach the Corleones for some help. You see, like Tom said, he was known as the top narcotics man, a maestro in his field. Sollozzo had it all figured out. His operation was as sophisticated as it was lucrative. He controlled the poppy fields in Turkey, processing plants in France and Sicily, and a foolproof supply chain to morph it into fine powder and distribute it. So after setting all this up, the one bottleneck of the operation was distributing it to a major untapped market like New York. Problem is, these fine powders were a red line. The commission had completely banned them, and so no one dared to defy them. But for a man as ambitious as Sollozzo, he saw this as an opportunity. The keys to this multi-billion-dollar opportunity were held by Don Corleone. And don't worry, we'll finally unveil Sollozzo's full plan, but we need to first dive in a little deeper into what Sollozzo was offering. Just a reminder, we'll be referring to the details from the novel, since a lot of these details are easily missed. But anyway, where were we? So, Sollozzo wanted the family to put up at least $1 million in cash and offer immunity from the law. In exchange, they'll get a piece of the action, though no one knew exactly how much. Now, the $1 million in cash is massive for Sollozzo. In fact, today that would be worth around $15 million. But the real value Sollozzo wanted, what was truly priceless, was the Don's influence and reputation. Now, the potential in this venture was massive. If they could actually follow through, they're looking at becoming multi-billionaires in an insanely short amount of time. But without Don Vito's connections, it would be a fool's errand. And so, here's where it gets tricky. The offer was extremely tempting. Tom and Sonny, for instance, saw opportunity. They knew whoever took hold of that industry would not only make a ridiculous amount of money, but have the resources not just to buy a few dirty cops, judges, or even politicians. They're now talking about wealth that could buy governments. The ball was in their court. Knowing that the Tatalias were involved was extremely concerning, and the fact that they had to figure it out through other means meant that Sollozzo did not intend to tell them. Another worrying sign. A small detail that some people miss is the fact that Vito had made up his mind weeks before the meeting, more specifically the moment Tom gave him the rundown. Wait, here's a bit more context. Sollozzo had been trying to get this sit-down set up for weeks, but the Don would delay it, a power move in and of itself. But the reality was he had two extremely important things to attend to. The first being his daughter's wedding, and as you know, for the Godfather, family was everything. Ning could split wide open. For Sollozzo, that was the kind of leverage you didn't waste. 3. When persuasion didn't cut it, Sollozzo flipped the script. It became a plata o plomo deal, silver or lead. He leaned on the Corleones hard. Sollozzo figured the only way to get what he wanted was to crush their resistance completely. 4. Bring Barzini into the fold. Barzini, always the sharp one, saw an opportunity in the chaos and jumped in without hesitation. His move added another layer to Sollozzo's already ambitious plan. With Barzini backing him, Sollozzo wasn't just selling drugs anymore, he was flipping the whole game on its head. The idea was simple: push the Corleones aside, take control, and rewrite the rules of the city. Barzini, naturally, loved every part of it. 5. Target the obstacle, Vito Corleone. Sollozzo looked at Vito and saw the guy who made the whole machine work. He wasn't just the Don, he was the brains, the heart, the guy who kept everything running smooth. Sollozzo figured, take out Vito, and the Corleones wouldn't know which way was up. The brothers, they'd be fighting each other before the dust settled. The crew, they'd be lost without Vito calling the shots. That hit on Vito wasn't just business, it was a power move to blow the whole family wide open and slide himself into the driver's seat. 6. Eliminate the leadership. After eliminating Luca Brasi, the Corleone family's superweapon, Sollozzo turned his sights on Vito. Taking out Vito was just the start. Sollozzo's plan was to hit the top guys, throw the Corleone. You really have to admire how brilliant this plan was executed. I mean, look at Sollozzo here. He can barely contain his excitement. Step 7. Force the Corleones to deal. With Vito out of the picture and the family scrambling, Sollozzo figured this move would back the Corleone family into a corner, leaving them no choice but to make a deal on his terms. He'd pushed the narcotics operation as their only way to stay in the game, a lifeline the Corleones couldn't afford to refuse. It wasn't just business, it was survival, and Sollozzo was betting the family would fold under the pressure. Step 8. Establish the drug trade. Once the Corleones were forced to play ball, Sollozzo planned to lock down the drug trade for good. With everything running smooth, connections greased, politicians in his pocket, he'd own the most profitable game in the underworld. Step 9. Push out the Corleones. With the drug racket secured, the Tattaglia-Barzini alliance had their sights set on more than just a deal. They wanted to sideline the Corleones completely, taking over piece by piece until there was nothing left of their empire.
Barzini's people chisel my territory and we do nothing about it. Pretty soon there won't be one place in Brooklyn I can hang my hat.
Tattaglia and Barzini weren't just after a slice of the pie, they were ready to run the whole bakery. With the drug trade firmly in their grasp, the Tattaglia-Barzini alliance would work to push the Corleones out of the game entirely, reshaping the balance of power in New York for good, establishing Tattaglia and Barzini as the dominant families. He underestimated the Corleone family, more specifically, Sonny. He thought he could lure him with the respect of becoming more wealthy than. But here's where Vito made a rare yet deadly mistake. And so, I'm sure you remember what happened next. Chapter 5. What They Should Have Done. He who plans but does not adapt to circumstances is doomed to failure. Plan for what is difficult while it is easy. Do what is great while it is small. Now there's a lot to say about what Vito should have done, so let's start with Sollozzo. With Sollozzo, as cynical and vicious as his strategy was, it worked. In that world, it was fair game. Where he really messed up was not following the art of war's principle of adaptability. You see, he formulated a brilliant plan. To be honest, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call it the perfect plan. He attacked his enemy when they least expected it, starting off by taking out their super weapon and capitalizing on Vito's catastrophic mistake. And yeah, we have to point this out. Vito sending Luca to meet with Sollozzo was the tiny nudge that Sollozzo needed to spark a chain reaction that set the Corleone Empire ablaze. I'll need to go deeper into this in a minute. But anyway, after everything went perfectly for him, Sollozzo soon lost his focus. Now, although he honestly, strategically speaking, he executed almost all of his moves to perfection, it was only sheer luck that Vito somehow survived being shot 5 times. That being said, these things happen. Just look at history. On paper, the early stages of many plans often go perfectly. Once the action begins, everything changes. Take Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812, for example, or Operation Barbarossa, history's largest invasion, crafted by Germany in 1941. Both were meticulously planned with every detail of logistics, strategy, and execution accounted for. Napoleon entered Russia with over 600,000 soldiers, fully expecting a swift campaign. Similarly, plans unfolded exactly as intended, with early victories and substantial advances. But what these plans failed to account for was the unforeseen, the human element, the shifting realities of war, and the brutal indifference of nature. For Napoleon, the vast distances, the scorched earth tactics employed by the Russians, and the brutal winter turned his seemingly unstoppable campaign into a catastrophic retreat. Out of his 600,000 troops, fewer than 100,000 made it back. Hitler faced similar issues. Operation Barbarossa's failure not only marked a turning point in the war, but also exposed critical weaknesses in Germany's military strategy, draining resources, undermining morale, and forcing the Wehrmacht into a prolonged conflict it was ill-prepared to sustain. In both cases, their initial success only set the stage for their ultimate failure. The careful preparation couldn't overcome the lack of adaptability when the realities on the ground changed. Now, contrast that with Sollozzo. Like Napoleon and the Führer, he meticulously planned his moves, from eliminating Vito to securing alliances and leveraging the Corleone family's vulnerabilities. His strategy worked at first, but where he faltered was in his ability to adapt when things didn't go according to plan. The unexpected survival of Vito should have been a wake-up call, a moment to recalibrate his approach. His failure wasn't in the preparation in case things went wrong. It was in his inability to adjust when the unexpected happened. This lack of adaptability is what separates a successful strategist from one doomed to fail. The fact is, being prepared is one thing, and essential, no doubt about it. But it's only one pillar of strategic mastery. It's a key pillar, yet without the second pillar, adaptability, it collapses. We have enough time to dive into it in this video, but I want to break down this quote. The first time I heard it, it seemed like just another meaningless motivational soundbite. You know the ones I'm talking about. I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of them, the ones self-proclaimed gurus post that sound great but really don't mean much. But once I realized what it really meant, it changed everything I thought I knew about strategy. General Dwight D. Eisenhower famously said, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." Now bear with me. That is the quote everyone remembers. On the surface, it's quite counterintuitive. Something that someone would say to sound more profound or mysterious than they actually are. But we have to go deeper. You see, the general and later president didn't actually stop there. This is what no one actually tells you he said. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I tell this story to illustrate the truth of the statement I heard long ago in the Army. Plans are worthless, but planning is everything. There is a very great distinction because when you are planning for an emergency, you must start with this one thing. The very definition of emergency is that it is unexpected, therefore it is not going to happen the way you are planning. So the first thing you do is to take all the plans off the top shelf and throw them out the window and start once more. But if you haven't been planning, you can't start to work, intelligently at least. That is the reason it is so important to plan, to keep yourselves steeped in the character of the problem that you may one day be called upon to solve, or to help to solve. Now, in the statements I have made, I don't mean to say there are not some verities, some unchanging truths, although again, to quote a military man, the only unchanging factor in war is the most changeable, uncertain, unpredictable element in war, and that is human nature. But the human nature of today is exactly what it was, apparently, in the time of Pericles and Alexander, and down through the ages to this day. Everything else, even terrain, even weather, seems to change.
In a nutshell, here's how I understand it and how I think it can be most useful to you. So why are plans themselves worthless? Well, the thing is, emergencies never play by the rules. They're unexpected, that's the whole definition. Sollozzo's plan, for example, worked perfectly on paper. Take out Vito, leverage the Corleone's weakened position, and secure his spot in the narcotics game. But then, reality hit. Vito's steps meant nothing. It's not that the plan was bad, it's that no plan survives contact with the unexpected. And so, why is planning everything? Well, because it simply prepares you for the unknown. The act of planning, not the plan itself, is what gives you the tools to adapt. Planning immerses you in the problem, forces you to think critically, and it prepares you to adjust when things go off script. It allows you to have a clearer view of the battlefield and at least have the knowledge to go in having already done most of the work. Flexibility. That's the real secret. When plans fail, sticking rigidly to them can lead to disaster. Planning isn't about predicting every move. It's about understanding the situation well enough to make the right calls when things change. It's about going in with the right resources and frame of mind. Flexibility is what lets you pivot without losing sight of your goal. And here's another layer, understanding the problem itself. Eisenhower said planning keeps you steeped in the character of the problem. It's not just about solving it, it's about knowing it inside and out. Failing to account for resilience and unpredictability can turn even a good plan into a liability. Finally, there's the human element. Eisenhower reminds us that the only unchanging factor in war is the most changeable, uncertain, unpredictable element in war, and that is human nature. Understanding human behavior is key, and it's a constant across history, from Alexander the Great to today. So what's the takeaway here? Plans fall apart, they always do, but planning, the process of thinking, preparing, and understanding, that's where the real power is. It's not just about having a plan, it's about being ready for what comes next. But if you don't want to take Eisenhower's word for it, take it from Iron Mike. Again, I really want you to take this on board and have it in your arsenal. It's the act of planning that's essential, only because it's the process of setting up and understanding the situation you're about to get into. That is where real power lies. Or whatever you want to call it. But when you're actually in the field applying all these strategies, it becomes a super weapon in your arsenal. It perfectly encapsulated the principle of planning and execution in the world of strategy. As Master Sun says, by altering his arrangements and changing his plans, he keeps the enemy without definite knowledge. By shifting his camp and taking circuitous routes, he prevents the enemy from anticipating his purpose. What he means here is simple. It's smart to change your plans when the situation calls for it. If you don't, and you keep using the same tactics over and over, you'll create a pattern. And in the game of strategy, patterns are deadly. They give your enemies a roadmap straight to your weaknesses. And so therefore, strategically altering your plans and moving with purpose becomes a powerful stratagem. It keeps your enemies guessing, it denies them the chance to predict your next move, and ensures you stay one step ahead in the game of strategy. But now, back to Sollozzo. How is this relevant to his foray against the Corleone family? Well, plans will go wrong. Once you begin taking action, the ripple effects that occur because of them are simply just too vast. It would be impossible and highly ineffective to even think you can predict every single possible outcome. And this is where people, highly intelligent people, let me add, go wrong. The goal is not to think you can control the outcome. The goal is to be ready for whatever comes at you. Once again, perfectly encapsulated by Master Sun, who states, "Do not depend on the enemy not coming. Depend rather on your readiness to meet him. Do not depend on the enemy not attacking. Depend rather on the fact that we have made our position unassailable." This is the key to mastering strategy. I honestly believe if there's one thing you should memorize from the art of war, it's this. Please, if there's one thing you take away from all of this, understand that the key to strategy, planning, and whatever else you want to throw in, it's not about all the fancy moves or clean and polished plans on paper. It all comes down to how you position yourself. You need to be ready, adaptable, and prepared to face whatever comes your way. That's the real game. Stay flexible, stay sharp, and never let them see you coming. I know we went in a little too high level here, but if you're watching a video like this all the way to this point, it shows both of us that you're not like the rest. You are a true outlier. We're not going to gatekeep or dumb down any of this. That wouldn't be an act of a friend. We're here to give you the raw value, to share and give you access to the kind of info and conversations the top 1% are having behind closed doors. No fluff, no sugarcoating, just the real strategies and insights that are proven to make a difference. And so, if you're ready to think like the best and ready to put in the effort to be the best, then you're in the right place. Sollozzo's failure wasn't in his ambition, it was in thinking his plan was invincible. He was going to challenge the most powerful crime family in the country, and for some reason never thought things could go wrong. Here's the thing, Vito should have tightened things up. More guards, tighter schedules, better communication in the family. Hell, even changing his routine now and then could have thrown Sollozzo off his game. Sun Tzu also says, "He who is prudent and lies in wait for an enemy who is not will be victorious." If Vito had been sharper about his defenses, Sollozzo would have had to think twice before making his move. 4. Control the battlefield. Sun Tzu says, "The clever combatant imposes his will on the enemy, but does not allow the enemy's will to be imposed on him." And what did Vito do? He refused Sollozzo outright and didn't plan for the backlash. That gave Sollozzo the upper hand, plain and simple. Here's the thing, Vito could have flipped the script. Instead of letting Sollozzo dictate the terms, he should have drawn him into a setting where the Corleones held all the cards. A staged negotiation maybe, or a calculated ambush that reminded everyone why the Corleones were untouchable. Sollozzo's boldness, backed by the Tattaglias, and as we later find out, the much more powerful Barzinis, blindsided Vito. If he'd taken control of the battlefield, this whole thing could have played out differently. Conclusion. Vito's mistakes weren't just tactical. They were a failure to adapt to a new kind of threat. Sollozzo wasn't playing by the old rules, and Vito didn't adjust in time. Sun Tzu's wisdom teaches us that strategy isn't just about reacting, it's about anticipating and controlling the flow of events. By stalling, eliminating the threat early, tightening security, or controlling the battlefield, Vito could have turned the tables and shifted the balance of power back in his favor. But in this business, even a Don can't afford to slip. Sure, hindsight is easy, but let's step back and see why Vito's moves might have made sense at the time. Now, saying things like Vito should or even could have predicted all of this would have happened is simply just lazy. Not here. Let's leave that to those Struns channels. First off, refusing Sollozzo outright wasn't some snap decision, it was calculated. Vito knew what narcotics meant. Drugs weren't like gambling or unions. They brought heat, the kind that could unravel everything he'd built. He spent years cultivating political allies who wouldn't want their names tied to dirty money. By shutting Sollozzo down right away, Vito was making a statement. The Corleones weren't about to compromise their empire for fast cash. And Sollozzo? He was risky, too bold, too aggressive. Giving him even a little leverage could have been dangerous for the family. Now, about not taking Sollozzo out early. It's easy to say Vito should have pulled the trigger first, but let's be real here. He didn't have all the information. He didn't know about the Barzinis pulling strings in the background. Making a move without that intel, that's how wars start. Vito's whole approach was about the long game. He didn't do preemptive strikes unless it was absolutely necessary, and at the time, he probably thought diplomacy might still work. This encounter wasn't just a turning point for the characters, it reshaped the entire power structure of the Mafia world and set the stage for the events of the Godfather saga. It is a stark reminder of how decisions made in a single moment can echo for years, altering destinies and reshaping empires. The Barzini factor. Now, there's one key factor we haven't touched on yet, the involvement of the cunning wolf, the true mastermind, Don Emilio Barzini. He's the shadow behind the scenes, the one pulling the strings and setting traps with the kind of precision that only a true strategist can execute. Once you realize how deep this gets, you'll never see the Godfather films the same way ever again. And let's be honest, Barzini gives us an equal, if not better, masterclass in the game of power. His moves are subtle, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. To fully break down his hidden power plays and the 48 laws of power he executes so masterfully, we need an entire video. So if you want to gain the kind of insights that give you a powerful advantage over your competition, make sure you're subscribed to the Culture Mafia and turn on those notifications. Barzini's strategies aren't just lessons, they're weapons, and once you learn how to use them, there's no telling how far ahead you'll get. Chapter 7. Real Life. Now, the Sollozzo storyline isn't just a gripping part of The Godfather, it's practically ripped from real life. You think this kind of backstabbing and power grabbing only happens in movies? Nah, this is how the mob really worked. Rivalries, shifting alliances, guys making big moves and paying the price. It's all there. The Corleone story? That's a reflection of the real mob families dealing with the rise of narcotics and the chaos it brought. Just like Sollozzo, the guys who tried to shake things up either climbed to the top or ended up in a ditch. So let's dig into how this whole storyline ties back to the real history of the Mafia and the drug trade. The foundations of Mafia drug operations. The drug business didn't start out as part of the Mafia's playbook. It was an unexpected chapter in a long history of calculated moves. Back in the early 20th century, Sicily was a smuggler's paradise. They moved olive oil, wine, whatever turned a profit. But drugs? That was an infamia, a disgrace. The old school bosses, both in the old country and in America, genuinely believed in a code of honor, one that set clear boundaries they refused to cross.
But I can't resist. I want to control it as a business, to keep it respectable. I don't want it near schools. I don't want it sold to children. That's an infamia.
But the Mafia was evolving, growing more sophisticated and deeply entrenched in American cities. They had built empires on bootlegging during Prohibition, and though that chapter had ended, They continued to thrive by dominating gambling, extortion, and unions. But with the alcohol trade gone, they needed new opportunities to sustain their power. After the Second World War, things changed dramatically. Europe lay in ruins, creating openings in black market trades as desperate economies and displaced industries fostered a thriving underground market. Meanwhile, American soldiers returning home brought more than just stories. They brought demand for something new. The Mafia's initial foray into narcotics began cautiously in the early 20th century, leveraging smuggling routes established during Prohibition to test the waters of this lucrative yet dangerous trade. Adding to this shift was the rise of a new generation of bosses, like Lucky Luciano, who were far more Americanized and saw no need to be bound by the old constraints of tradition. To them, the drug trade was an opportunity too lucrative to ignore. The end of Prohibition forced the Mafia to confront a harsh reality. Their most lucrative revenue stream was gone, leaving them scrambling for alternatives. Narcotics looked profitable, no doubt about that. When alcohol was outlawed, it created a booming underground market that the Mafia exploited to its fullest. Bootlegging became a cornerstone of their operations, making them rich and powerful beyond their wildest dreams. But when Prohibition ended in 1933, it was like a rug being pulled out from under them. The lucrative alcohol trade evaporated almost overnight, leaving a void in their revenue streams. That gap in their income made drugs hard to resist. Narcotics was the new gold rush. Profits so big they made bootlegging look like chump change. The market was wide open, wild and unregulated, but the risks were brutal. For the Mafia, it wasn't an easy call. The stakes were sky high, but so were the rewards. In the end, they had to adapt or get left behind. A promise of fast, massive money was too good to ignore, and soon enough, they were all in. At first, they played it carefully, just dipping their toes in, keeping things small. Nobody wanted to be the one to blow it all on a bad deal. But then the money started pouring in, and suddenly it was obvious this was the future. One deal could out-earn a year of rackets. It was dangerous, sure, but for those who jumped in, the payoff was worth every risk. Key figures in early expansion. One of the first to allegedly go all in was Vito Genovese, the real Barzini. Vito Genovese was a name everyone feared. Smart and ruthless, he didn't give a damn about tradition or any of that old-school honor. He cared about the bottom line. Genovese built pipelines that stretched from North Africa to Europe all the way to the streets of New York, flooding the market with product and stacking his pockets with cash. But not everyone was on board. The 1957 Appalachian meeting was meant to be just another routine gathering of the families, a chance to talk business, settle disputes, and keep things running smoothly. But instead, it turned into a clash of visions for the Mafia's future. Carlo Gambino, one of the old-school bosses, made his stance clear. Drugs were off the table. It'll bring too much heat. The feds, the rats, they'll tear us apart. For others at the table, the staggering profits from narcotics drowned out any warnings. To them, the money wasn't just tempting, it was too big to pass up. And this is where some former mafiosi will assert that the Mafia never dealt in narcotics. And, well, I'll leave that up to you to decide. As the Mafia was tightening its grip on power, an operation started brewing in the shadows, an operation that would shake the world of organized crime. It was bold, it was massive, and it was clean. The people behind it didn't miss a step. They built a network so airtight it could move product across continents without breaking a sweat. A game changer that turned the Mafia into a global player. Its name? The French Connection. It started in the poppy fields of Turkey, where farmers harvested the raw material. From there, the goods made their way to Marseille, France, a city that practically wrote the book on black market business. Chemists in hidden labs turned raw opium into pure high-grade powders. The product was packed into everyday items, canned goods, car tires, you name it, and shipped across the Atlantic. By the time it hit the streets of America, the operation was running like a machine, and the money was rolling in. The Sicilian Mafia orchestrated this pipeline with precision, overseeing the manufacturing and transport, while their American counterparts ensured smooth distribution across major U.S. cities. This elaborate network exemplified how the Mafia adapted to the lucrative opportunities of the post-war era, demonstrating their ability to manage complex, multinational operations with ruthless efficiency. By the 1960s, the operation was a well-oiled machine. A single shipment of heroin could turn a modest investment of a few $1,000s into millions. The profits were staggering, and for a while, the setup seemed invincible. However, with great success came unwanted attention. Federal agents caught wind of the operation, and once they began investigating, they didn't let up. For a time, though, the French connection was the crown jewel of the Mafia's ventures, raking in profits unlike anything they had seen before. But was the trade worth the heat, or would it eventually destroy everything they'd built? Resistance within the Mafia. Guys like Carlo Gambino and Stefano Magaddino thought it was poison, not just for the streets, but for the families themselves. Drugs brought big money, sure, but they also brought bigger problems, exacerbating tensions within the ranks and leading to cracks in the once ununified families. And this is the tension that played out in The Godfather. Vito Corleone famously turns down Sollozzo's offer, clearly stating,
"If they know my business is drugs instead of gambling, which they regard as a harmless vice, drugs is a dirty business."
But like Sonny in the film, some of the younger guys couldn't resist. Like Barzini and Tattaglia, and later pretty much the rest of the Dons, the lure of quick money was too strong. The Sicilian connection and the pizza connection. Sicily wasn't just the birthplace of the Mafia. It became the heart of this business. The Corleonesi clan, led by Salvatore Totorina and Bernardo Provenzano, turned the island into a narco factory. These weren't just gangsters. They were businessmen with a brutal edge. They didn't just eliminate competition, they wiped out anyone who even looked like a threat. In the US, the pizza connection took the game to another level, linking the Sicilian powders trade directly to American distribution networks in an ingenious and covert operation. Using pizza parlors as fronts, the Sicilian Mafia moved heroin across the country. To the average customer, it was just a slice of pepperoni. But behind the scenes, it was a multi-million-dollar operation. When the FBI finally cracked the case in the 1980s, it was one of the biggest drug busts in history. Law enforcement's response. Feds weren't just going to sit back and let the Mafia rake it in. The RICO Act of the 1970s gave prosecutors the tools they needed to go after entire organizations, not just the individual players. Suddenly, being a boss wasn't just about calling the shots, it was about dodging indictments. In Italy, the fight was even more intense. Judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino led the charge, taking on the Sicilian Mafia in the Maxi trials of the 1980s. They knew the risks, but they did it anyway. And when the Mafia struck back, assassinating them both, it only made their cause stronger. The world saw the Mafia for what it was, a ruthless machine, willing to kill anyone who got in its way. Cultural reflections and legacy. The drug trade didn't just change the Mafia, it changed how the world saw them. The romanticized image of honorable criminals gave way to the reality of ruthless, money-hungry organizations. Movies like The Godfather captured this shift, using characters like Sollozzo and Barzini to show the seductive danger of the drug trade. Meanwhile, Vito Corleone's resistance reflected the internal struggle of an organization torn between its past and its future. Today, the Mafia's involvement in narcotics remains a cautionary tale. It's a story of ambition run wild, of power gained and lost, and it's a reminder that in the pursuit of money, even the strongest empires can crumble. When the Mafia entered the drug trade, it was like opening Pandora's box. The profits were enormous, but so were the risks. It brought them power, but it also brought them enemies, from law enforcement to their own ranks. It fundamentally changed who they are. In the end, if there's one thing the Mafia teaches us, it's that greed always comes at a cost. Chapter 8. Lessons. Like I said at the start, this scene is the spark that set the whole world ablaze. It's not just a pivotal moment in The Godfather, it's a masterclass in the art of power. Every word, every glance, every move carries so much weight that you can practically feel the tension in the room. It's one of the rare moments where the game of power is laid bare, principle by principle. The lessons aren't just buried in the dialogue, they're woven into the very fabric of the encounter. What's more, these principles don't just stop here, they ripple across all three films. But this scene, it's unique. It's the starting point, the moment where the careful balance of power begins to shift. Because this isn't just another movie scene, it's the highest form of storytelling. And once you see the game for what it is, you can't help but play it better. So without further ado, let's dive in. Let's break down the principles, the moves, and the lessons you can apply to your own life, the culture Mafia style. Lesson 1. This one's very overlooked because of people's tendency to forget that there are a few key fundamentals that you always need. But since most people are quite lazy, going through life as a feather in the wind, they never take time to truly grasp this. What Sun Tzu is basically saying is that the general who wins a battle doesn't just show up and hope for the best. The battle begins long before the fighting does, thinking through every move, every risk, every outcome. By the time the battle starts, he's already won in his mind. That's the kind of preparation that separates the winners from the losers. Now, on the other hand, you've got the general who doesn't prepare, who walks into a fight thinking he'll figure it out along the way. Maybe he's overconfident, maybe he's lazy, or maybe he just doesn't know any better. Either way, he's done before he even begins, and the poor fool who doesn't calculate his moves at all, let's just say the battlefield isn't going to be kind to him. Here's the point. Life's no different. You want to win? You've got to prepare. Let's talk about your career. You're up for a big interview. Are you walking in cold, hoping to wing it? Or are you the guy who knows everything about the company, the role, and even the person interviewing you? The one who's rehearsed the tough questions, who's already visualized landing the job? You tell me who's walking away with the offer. Now think about money. The smart investor doesn't just throw cash around and cross his fingers. He studies the market, knows the risks, and plans for the long haul. And the guy who skips the prep, he's the one crying when his fortune disappears overnight. And relationships, don't even get me started. The people who succeed are the ones who think ahead and who know how to handle a tough conversation, anticipate what their partner needs, and keep things steady when life throws curveballs. And business? Well, that's the clearest example. A sharp entrepreneur studies the terrain. They know the competition, the customers, the opportunities, and they've got a plan. Find your code, live by it, and let it guide you. Because a person with no code is just another player in someone else's game. But a person with a code, they write their own rules. Lesson 3. Be cautious of greed. Don't confuse ambition with greed. Ambition without honor is like a ship without a rudder, adrift, directionless, and ultimately destined for ruin. In the pursuit of power and wealth, it's all too easy to succumb to the allure of ruthless ambition, forsaking principles for personal gain. Yet true greatness lies in the delicate balance between ambition and honor, a lesson exemplified by Michael Corleone and the Corleone family's journey. The difference between ambition and greed. Ambition and greed may appear similar on the surface, but they are fundamentally different. Ambition is the drive to achieve, fueled by a vision and purpose that benefits not just the individual, but also those around them. Greed, on the other hand, is a corrosive force, a relentless hunger for more at any cost, often at the expense of others. Greed disregards boundaries and destroys relationships, while ambition, when tempered with honor and restraint, builds lasting legacies. Ambition seeks growth, but greed undermines it. The Corleones understood this distinction, at least in their early days under Vito Corleone's leadership. The Corleone family's story is a cautionary tale of ambition and greed. Vito's balanced approach allowed him to build an empire while retaining the loyalty and respect of those around him. He understood that power without honor is fleeting. By contrast, Michael's later years illustrate the perils of unchecked greed, a path that alienated allies, fractured his family, and eroded the very legacy he sought to protect. The lesson is clear. Ambition is a powerful tool, but only when wielded with honor and restraint. Don't let the pursuit of more blind you to the principles that define true greatness. As Vito Corleone taught us, power earned through respect and purpose endures, while power fueled by greed crumbles under its own weight. That unquenchable thirst for constantly wanting more and more. Keep in mind that greed and ambition are often conflated. While they can be related, it is important to know the distinction between them. This has to be quite nuanced because some people can interpret it and think that having any level of ambition is somehow evil or inherently unethical, which can be true. The relentless ambition of some individuals has always been a source of many tragedies, but at the same time, it's been the source of humanity's greatest achievements. No one in human history has ever achieved something impactful without a certain level of ambition. With that being said, it is a double-edged sword. As you probably know, oftentimes ambition is the catalyst that gains success, but sooner or later, if it turns into greed, add to it a large amount of arrogance. It's not merely about aspiring to achieve the seemingly impossible, it becomes a need to satisfy your ego, even if it's delusional. You rely on your past successes to gauge your capabilities, which, although relevant, don't guarantee the ability to surpass certain thresholds. After all, as the 48 Laws of Power correctly point out, there's nothing more intoxicating than a victory. At the same time, nothing more dangerous. This is something we can learn from Michael. What to do and what not to do. Sounds strange, but I think you know why. Michael's ambition is what saved the family and established it into a billion-dollar dynasty. At the same time, this relentless pursuit had turned his heart to stone. Ultimately, what had started as a burning desire to save his family had eventually engulfed it, burning down everything around it. An all-consuming inferno, engulfing and incinerating everything in its path. To be ambitious with honor is to pursue success with integrity, never compromising your principles for temporary gains. It's about playing the long game, understanding that true power stems from not coercion, but from respect and trust earned through honorable conduct. In the cutthroat world of business and politics, it's easy to lose sight of ethical considerations in the pursuit of success. Yet history has shown time and again, those who achieve greatness with honor leave a lasting legacy that transcends mere material wealth. Embrace ambition, but let honor be your guiding light. For in the end, it's not just about what you achieve, but how you achieve it that defines your legacy. Let the example of Michael Corleone serve as a reminder. Greatness is not measured by the size of your empire, but by the strength of your character. Remember, money is a tool, but being wealthy is a mentality. True wealth is found in abundance of character, wisdom, and influence. Money in this context becomes a mere instrument through which one can manifest their vision and impact the world. Viewing money as a tool is to empower oneself to wield it wisely, leveraging its potential to create value and opportunity. It's about recognizing that wealth extends far beyond bank accounts and investments. It resides in the intangible assets of knowledge, relationships, and integrity, the legacy you leave behind for future generations. In the pursuit of wealth, it's easy to become ensnared by the trappings of materialism, chasing after fleeting pleasures and status symbols. Yet those who understand that true wealth is a mentality are liberated from this cycle of consumerism. They focus instead on cultivating a mindset of abundance that transcends the whole concept of money. Lesson 4. Know when to speak and when to stay silent. This is a lesson that permeates through the most important turning points in the trilogy. The first, of course, is Sonny's outburst in the Sollozzo meeting, which is what put the Corleone family in this mess to begin with. And then there's Fredo. Pretty much his entire character arc in Part 2 is a cautionary tale about not knowing when to keep his mouth shut. I can see. 3. Practice emotional resilience. Unexpected outcomes often test your patience and composure. Being prepared isn't just about logistics, it's about a mindset. Develop the ability to stay calm, think clearly, and act decisively, even under pressure. Number 4. Learn from experience. Vito didn't become the Godfather overnight. His ability to prepare for all outcomes was honed through years of observing others, learning from mistakes and adapting to challenges. Use every experience, good or bad, as a lesson to refine your strategy. As Vito Corleone taught us, the true power isn't in knowing what's coming, it's in being ready for whatever comes. Here's the thing about power. Short-sighted moves will kill you faster than an enemy with a knife. That's the essence of Law 29. Plan all the way to the end of the 48 Laws of Power. It's not just about making the right move today. It's about knowing where every step will take you tomorrow, next week, or even 10 years from now. If you don't have the end in sight, you might as well be walking blindfolded off a cliff. Vito Corleone didn't build an empire by reacting to what was right in front of him. He thought far beyond the immediate. Every decision, every alliance, every calculated risk, it all connected to a larger plan. When Sollozzo approached him with the narcotics deal, Vito didn't just see the money on the table, he saw the ripple effects, the loss of his political allies, the attention from law enforcement, the instability it would bring to his family's operations. So he said no, not because he wasn't tempted, but because he already mapped out where that road would lead. and it wasn't anywhere he wanted to go. This is what planning to the end looks like. Vito didn't let the glitter of short-term gain blind him. He stayed focused on his long-term goal, protecting the Corleone legacy and keeping his family in power. That's the brilliance of Law 29. While others get distracted by what's right in front of them, the true power players are thinking 5 steps ahead. Avoiding the pitfalls of short-sightedness. Here's where most people go wrong. They act without thinking about what comes next. Maybe it's a business decision that promotes fast profits but alienates your best clients. If you sabotage because you're too focused on winning the argument, not the war. Or maybe it's a big dramatic move that feels good in the moment but leaves you vulnerable down the road. Think of Sollozzo himself. He offered Vito the narcotics deal, expecting him to jump at the chance for more money and power. But he didn't think through the end game. When Vito refused, Sollozzo's short-sighted reaction and assassination attempt set off a chain of events that destroyed his own plans. He underestimated Vito's ability to play the long game, and it cost him everything. Application. Plan your end game. This law isn't just for mafia dons or generals, it's for anyone trying to succeed. If you're launching a business, don't just focus on getting it off the ground. Think about where you want it to be in 5 years, 10 years, and build your moves around that vision. In relationships, don't let petty conflicts or impulsive decisions derail the bigger picture. Know what you want: long-term happiness, trust, stability, and act accordingly. Even in everyday life, this law applies. Don't take shortcuts that sabotage your future. Plan for the promotion, not just a paycheck. Think about where your decisions will land you, not how they feel in the moment. The lesson: power is a long game. Planning all the way to the end isn't easy. It takes patience, discipline, and a willingness to look beyond the immediate. But it is the difference between those who win once and those who keep winning. Vito Corleone understood this. His moves weren't about today's battle, they were about tomorrow's victory. The message of Law 29 is simple. Don't just act. Strategize. Think beyond the moment. Know where you're going, and don't stop until you get there. That's how you build power that lasts. Lesson 6. Know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person. You see, power isn't just about strength, it's about understanding the battlefield. And sometimes the most dangerous mistake you can make isn't losing a fight, it's picking the wrong fight in the first place. That's the heart of Law 19. Know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person. If you respect power wherever it may lie, and never assume you've got nothing to lose. Whew, that was intense. It feels like we just traveled back in time, had a strategy meeting, analyzed battles, sat down with historical legends, and uncovered secrets most people miss. But here's the thing, this wasn't just about storytelling. I hope you walked away with real valuable insights that you can start applying in your own life right now. There's still so much I want to share with you, but can't. If you enjoyed this video and got something out of it, drop a comment below. Let me know what resonated with you. And if you're ready to take things to the next level, to truly take over and transform your life, click the link in the description. Let's see if you have what it takes. For those of you who want to get even more raw, no-nonsense practical lessons like this, join our email list. We've got something huge coming. Once again, it was a pleasure. Hope you found this beneficial. But now things are really just heating up. So now, it's time for the next move. Watch this video next. Ciao. See you there.